Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. I have another guest, and this one is probably almost my favorite besides my daughter because I know him so well and we worked together for many years. And so I'm just excited for you to get to know my friend, Damon Parker. And we probably worked together at Washburn Rural High School in Topeka for at least 12 years, I'm guessing.
Sounds all right.
I think we left in the same year. And so, we're both former educators. We love education, but we also love the new things that we're doing. And Damon does a lot with teen mental health, but he has these other things that are going on too, which I will let him talk about. But today we'll probably focus mostly on the teen mental health because he has a lot of experience in working with teens, but also in the mental health space. And so I wanted you to hear what he's doing and how he's helping the world because I want you to know all those things. So, Damon Parker, thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Cynthia. This is awesome. Honored
Sure.
to be here.
Well, tell us a little bit about, you know, i- how you got into, besides after you left education, you are doing some other things and you're working with teens somewhat in one of your jobs for with mental health. So, how did you get into doing that?
Man, life is a strange journey. You never really know what's coming for you next. And I I just finished reading the book The New Happy. If you haven't read that one, you should definitely pick it up.
Okay.
And she talks about how in order to find happiness, we need to take the gifts that we have and give them to the world and then just be open to whatever the universe gives back to us.
Mm.
And that's what I've always tried to do. And it started through education. And then that kind of morphed into education and coaching. Because for my first 10 years of teaching, I taught kindergarten and didn't really coach anything. And then I moved to Washburn Rural where we taught together for a long time. And then through the coaching thing, I started finding this leadership and this gift to be pretty good on stage with a microphone. And then it was like, okay, how can we utilize this? Then we started doing in the springtime some speaking engagements for businesses, associations, corporations, things like that. I never coached anything in the spring or summer, so that would leave my calendar open to do that. Since, as you know, public school educators don't get compensated exceptionally well.
Mhm.
But then, like, I've always told kids, don't go out and follow your passion. I think that's lousy advice. If everybody followed their passion, then everybody would want to be a professional fisherman or a professional cupcake maker, and it doesn't work that way. We can't all do that. But what we can do is we can take those gifts that we have and we can give them back to the world and then find passion within whatever work we're doing, utilizing our gifts. And
Mhm.
so that's what I've tried to do. And then it's that the universal law of reciprocity where you give your gifts out to the world and then the world gives it back to you. And so we just did that with no intention of trying to move on from education. Like I loved teaching. I loved the position that I was in and the place where I was. But then something came along where we did well enough at something for a long time that other people started to take notice. And in 2021, I was coaching both the boys and girls wrestling team at Washburn Rural High School. And we became the first school in the history of the United States to win a boys and a girls wrestling state championship in the same season.
Mm.
Nobody had done it before. Nobody's done it since. It's a really difficult thing to do. And that garners some national attention when something like that happens, especially when the head coach resigns immediately afterwards, which
Mhm.
I did. And I wasn't really forthcoming at first as to why. And I still coached the girls team, but coaching the boys team and the girls team, it's not only do we have two successful programs. Our girls program is the largest girls wrestling program on the planet, and that's
Mm.
not me speaking hyperbolically. Like, it's true. It's an actual fact. It is the largest participation numbers of girls in wrestling in the world, and so we can't practice at the same time. And so what that meant was coaching boys and girls wrestling at the same time was like coaching boys basketball and girls softball in the same season. So we had two
Mhm.
completely separate practices, separate practice plans. We had separate kids that are trying to get college scholarships, different video breakdowns we got to do. So I would practice with the boys from 3:15 to 5:15. Then I would run and take a shower because you get soaked at wrestling practice, then run back in and from 5:45 until 7:45 run girls wrestling practice. Then those girls would leave and then I would do all of the administrative type work and all that stuff. And then by the time I was done with all that, I'd get home at 9:15, 9:30 every night, and my kids were already asleep.
Mm.
And my kids were young at the time, 5, 6 years old, and it's like, man, I'm just missing my kids' childhood because I didn't see them in the morning because I would leave before they got on the bus. And then I didn't see them at night because I would get home after they were asleep. And so I never saw my kids. And that started to wear on me. And I did that for a couple of years. And then my mental health got to a place where I just could not do it anymore. And so when I resigned, of course, people wanted answers because I was still relatively young compared to my peers in the position, and they like it just doesn't make sense that somebody leaves there. And then
Mhm.
I can't remember how we came to the decision, but I had been struggling. This wasn't it, but I had been struggling with my mental health for a long time, and then shortly thereafter, Josh Jones, who was a pillar of the Topeka community, had kids that went to Washburn Rural. He's one of the higher up guys at Advisors Excel. He died by suicide in March of 21, which was right after that wrestling state championship year. And then I went to the funeral with Lindsay, my wife, who works at Advisors Excel. And and I never met Josh the same time, or the first time that we were in the same room together was at his funeral.
Mm.
But Lindsay knew him well, and I just went to support her. But while we were there, I just had this moment of clarity that if I did not do something to change what was going on in my life, then it was only a matter of time until that was my family sitting in the front row. And I
Mm.
needed to do something different. And so that's when we made the decision to resign from boys wrestling. When I did that, we then connected with Cody Foster at Advisors Excel, who was one of Josh's best friends. And he said, again, this kind of all goes back to, you use your gifts, your talents, or whatever for the betterment of the people around you. And
Mhm.
Cody knew that I was good at what I do. And he said, I'm thinking about starting this nonprofit where we talk to kids about mental health and find somebody that can connect with them. And he was like, do you want to run that? And I've told people before, it's like, he said, would you like to be the executive director? I was like, let me think about that. And I go to the bathroom and I Googled real quick, what is an executive director? Because I knew nothing about running a nonprofit or being a director or anything like that. And I just kind of read a Wikipedia entry. I was like, okay, yeah, we can do that. And so I came back out and I was like, yeah, pending Lindsay's approval, yeah, let's do this. And so we moved on it. And since June of 2022, I've now been in 171 schools and talked to 64,000 kids, I think. And
Mm.
this thing has really taken off. And I think it works really well because there's the strange dichotomy of I'm a real human being, not some dude that they had to watch on a YouTube video in their homeroom class, but also I'm a stranger and they know that I live however far away and they're never going to see me again. So
Mhm.
then they can come up to me afterwards and tell me things that they might not want to tell that counselor that they see in the cafeteria every single day, especially if it's a smaller school where the
Mhm.
counselor is also their math teacher and is also their volleyball coach and is
Mhm.
also
Or
the
friends
lunchroom
with their
supervisor.
parents.
Yeah,
Mhm.
they don't want to go in and tell these things to a counselor. And for whatever reason, they're they're perfectly comfortable telling those things to the weird old bald guy that showed up at their school. So it seems to be a pretty good fit. And I think the coolest thing about it is we haven't done a single cold call yet. Every single school that we've been in has been by word of mouth of another school that we visited that their principal talked to another principal and said, "Hey, this would probably be good for your kids." So yeah, it's going off really well, and that's where we're at right now. And so I tell folks it's like I have one of the most odd Venn diagrams you can imagine, but there is an intersection of all of these things. I do this speaking for the nonprofit in secondary schools, primarily in Kansas, but some in surrounding states. And then I do professional speaking for businesses, associations, corporations. Still do that kind of nationwide, and those kind of overlap a little bit. But then like I said, I still coach that girls wrestling team, and mental health management and emotional regulation. Those play a role in all three of those things that I do, and and I think that's part of the reason why our girls wrestling team has had so much success over the past 5 years. We've won 4 out of the last 5 state championships, and the worst that we've ever finished at state is second. Like that's pretty good when people are like, "Oh my gosh, what happened to Washburn Rural when you finished second at state?" And I think the main reason is not because I know more wrestling moves than anybody else. Like I'm pretty average in that regard. It's it's that we really, really invest in the mental aspect of being a student athlete. And I think that's forgotten by a lot of coaches. And you can tell
Mhm.
the ones that invest in it and the ones that don't. And the ones that do are the ones that are up towards the top every year.
Mm. Well, I have always said, and I'm still saying, though I don't know how to affect it now, but if the school spent more time on mental health issues, emotional regulation, how to deal with so many of those type of things, we wouldn't have to worry so much about attendance and behavior reports and what someone's grades are. Because when you are regulated and you feel good, you're going to do the best that you can do in all of those areas.
I
And
could not agree more.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so I don't understand why, who do we have to tell? Who do we have to get this information to so that they know? Because I knew it when I started in education years ago, and it still is not that much better. We talk about it a little bit more, and they have you come, which is amazing, but it's always like these tiny little pockets of time, and it can be so easily forgotten after that because it's just not embedded into the day.
Yeah. And I don't know what the answer is to that. And Cynthia, I think the scary part is I don't think there is an answer to it because there's always going to be a subset of people that understand that that's what we need to do, but
Mhm.
those aren't the people that sign the checks, and so
Mhm.
that's not the way that it works, and it's
Yeah.
unfortunately not ever going to work that way. But I mean, think about what a better position we would be in, and it would take a nationwide culture shift,
Mhm.
which is why I think it's impossible, especially considering the state we're in right now. But
Mhm.
if everybody would just slow down for a second and stop worrying about, hey, we have to jump to this next thing, we have to achieve this next thing, and we have to go for that next medal or that next trophy or that next whatever. And if we could just be present for a minute
Mhm.
and be grateful for the stuff that we have and work on the things that we need to work on both personally and as a group collectively, and then I think we'd be a heck of a lot more effective. And if that means that, we're spending half the day on, like, it drives me nuts when I hear people refer to them as soft skills. It's like,
Mhm.
what more important skills are there than being able to regulate your own emotions, being able to collaborate with other people, having empathy for other people? Like, that is the only skill that matters. Like, I
Right.
don't care about any of that other stuff if you can't do
Mhm.
those things, right?
Right.
And most employers don't either. Like, it's great if you can do quantum physics, but if you can't talk to another human being, good luck out there. That's
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah,
know.
exactly.
I got to get on a soapbox about that because again, that's one of the things that I think a big reason that a lot of educators are leaving the industry is exactly that.
I
I
do
think that
too.
they see that the people that are making the decisions are not willing to make the decisions that are in the best interest of kids, and so
Mhm.
they're thinking I'm going to get out while I can,
Yeah, I
and
think
it's
so too.
unfortunate because we're losing too many good people.
Right, because and I loved my job too, and I didn't wanna leave because I didn't like counseling. There wasn't a day in 31 years I didn't love going to work, but I wanted to like you said earlier, bet on myself. Like, I wanted
Right.
to see what can I do in this world? How can I take my gifts, which my gifts are loving people and giving them support and an open, safe place to talk about things. That was always my gift in all the years of my counseling, and I thought, I want to go outside of the school and do that. I want to affect more people. I want to see more teens. And now I can see teens. Well, all my clients right now are across the United States, but I could see them around the world depending on if I want to stay up late or get up early or they do. And I would be willing to do that if I got people in other countries. Other countries listen to this podcast. I just don't have any clients from there. But when you were talking about like really paying attention to the mental health of your team, how do you do that? Like, what are some things that you're doing with a big group of people that helps their mental health? And because that could be a key for parents to know about, or school counselors, or anyone who's listening.
Yeah, number one, I one of them, like, how you have those fork in the road moments in your life where it's like if you take this one step this direction, your entire life is going to be different. Mine took place on a treadmill at Gold's Gym in North Kansas City in 2011. I had just interviewed at Washburn Rural, and at that time I was teaching elementary school, and I really didn't have any intentions of ever leaving elementary. It just kind of fell into my lap, and I was like, "Yeah, we'll investigate." And I interviewed, and I was listening to a podcast on my iPod, and Al Golden, who at the time was the football coach for Temple University, he told the interviewer, and I'm sure that he attributed this quote to someone else, but he's who I remember it from. He said, none of those, they were talking about how do you turn the culture around at a place like that? Because Washburn Rural at the time was a bottom feeder. Like my
Mm,
first year as coach at Washburn Rural, we finished 32nd out of 32 teams in 6A. We were the worst team in Kansas. And
mm,
so it was, if I was going to take over that job, it was going to be a complete rebuild from the studs. And I was listening to this podcast, and Al Golden said, because he turned around Temple. The one thing that you have to understand is that no kids care how much you know until they know how much you care. And
mm,
so if you're putting all of this out into the world about how smart you are and like you did this and you accomplished that, they don't give a rip about any of that as
mm,
unless they know that you really care about them as individuals. And
mm,
so a couple of ways that we do this. And I think it sounds so simple, Cynthia, but I think so many parents even, and I have to check some of our parents in our program sometimes, uh, they overlook this. Stop making it about outcomes.
mm,
It's not about outcomes. And the the story I always tell on this is and it took me forever to learn this, that it's not about state championships. And I spent the first 20 years of my coaching career chasing trophies. And it was just like, what can I do to get to that next thing, to win that next thing? In 2020, right before the COVID shutdown, we won our first state championship. And it was with the girls program. And at that time, girls program or girls state tournament was in Salina, Kansas, and the boys was in Wichita. So girls got done on Thursday, boys was Friday, Saturday. So girls get done, we take some pictures, they give us the trophy. I jump in my car with the trophy. I buckle it into the back seat. And I drive by myself to go to Wichita to coach the boys. And as I'm leaving that parking lot, there's a stop sign. I can still see it. I stop at that stop sign and to look that way, and I see out of the corner of my eye that trophy's in the back seat. And it's like, here it is, that tangible thing that's right here that I've been working for 2 decades. I can reach out and touch it. And it was like, okay, that was cool. Now what? You know
mm,
what I mean? All this time, and I had that moment of clarity where it was like, I spent so long chasing after the wrong thing, and
mhm,
it's not about outcomes. And from that moment forward, I was like, it will never be about state championships again. And I would rather have a kid say the F word in my practice room than say the word state championship. We don't talk about it. We don't set goals. I think goals are ridiculous. Like if somebody asks me what I'm going to do 10 years from now, man, I don't know what I'm having for lunch today. Like I'm not thinking that far ahead. There are so many independent variables that are going to happen between now and 3 months from now that there's no
mhm,
way I could set a goal, right? I
mm.
could set a compass, have a general idea of where I want to go, right? But at the
Yeah.
same time, it's like if I draw a line in the sand and say, by the end of this year, I will blah, 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 and then I don't accomplish it, then
Mhm,
I've missed the journey. I've missed all these wonderful things that happened along the way.
mhm,
So to answer your question, the number one thing is stop making it about outcomes. Instead, making it about relationships and making it about being present with the people and the situations that you're in. And
mhm,
then no matter what happens, like you're going to be pleased with the way things go for you, right? And if
mhm,
at the very least you're going to learn something. And
mhm,
what I have found is when you make it more about relationships and experiences and you don't make it about championships, then the championships just kind of take care of themselves, right? We'll
mhm,
let everybody else worry about that and we'll keep bringing them home because we don't talk about it. It's not a thing in our room. And like
mhm,
they give it to us, it's like, okay, cool. But that one year that we finished second, like our girls got together, they gave us the trophy, they got around and they started jumping up and down, chanting, "We're number two, we're number two," because it doesn't matter to us, right?
mhm,
And I think so many parents put undue pressure on their kids by
mhm,
saying, "Oh, like this is that big tournament this weekend, or here's a big game this Friday night, or whatever." Like, get rid of that nonsense. Tell them to just enjoy where they are because they only get to ride this thing one time. That's it.
yeah.
The second thing is really, really investing time in relationship building with other people around you that you normally wouldn't sit at their lunchroom table. And we
Mm,
are very intentional about that. Having our seniors sit with our freshmen in practice, doing journaling activities where it's like we intentionally go find somebody that is out of your social circle so that we realize that, you know what, we're all pretty similar on this thing and we're all just trying to figure this out. Nobody has it figured out. Right.
mhm,
And the other thing that I think is huge too is conflict resolution. I think that the vast majority of kids are not taught how to peacefully resolve a conflict
mhm,
and are not taught the fact that you don't have to love everybody that you're around, but you do have to coexist with other people. And you
mhm,
have to treat them with respect if you want to be treated with respect.
mhm,
And you'll have some hard-headed kids, oh, respect is earned. No, it's not. That's a human being, man. They earn their
mhm,
respect by being here, you know? And
mhm,
it takes some people a long time to learn that.
mhm,
And with kids, it's every year we have to have the same conversation of throughout human history, there has not been a single conflict that has been resolved via Snapchat. Like you have to have the personal skills to sit down with a person, look them in the eyes, tell them about a situation, tell them what you did wrong and what you'd like to see them change. And if you can do those things, then you can start to work through that conflict. And I've found that especially with our girls program, it's those conflicts that are bubbling under the surface that they never really address that are
Mhm.
playing a huge role in the struggles that they have with their mental health. So again, getting rid of any kind of focus on outcomes and being present, focusing on developing relationships within our group of people, and then because that bleeds off into the classroom and into their personal lives,
Mhm.
and then learning how to manage conflicts within our team, but then that bleeds into those conflicts that they have with mom and dad or with brother and sister, or with their boyfriend or their girlfriend or whoever. So if we
Mhm.
take care of those three things, then generally our kids' mental health seems to be in a pretty good spot because they know that whether they win or lose when they're out in the match, and whether it's a JV match or a state championship match, if they do something really silly and they end up getting pinned, and it's not me, it's another, they know no matter who's sitting in their corner, they're getting a hug regardless of the outcome when they come off the mat. And if you
Mhm.
do that, man, then kids can kind of get rid of some of that pressure that I think is really weighing a lot of them down.
Yeah, I think so too. A lot of my clients are so busy with so many things. I my sessions are only 30 minutes, and I have some kids that will literally say, "I don't know if I have 30 minutes in 7 days to
Right.
do this." And I just think, "What? How? I would never wanna be that busy." You gotta have downtime, you gotta have
Right.
fun, you gotta just waste time sometimes, like, that's
Right.
a fun thing to do, and kids are not wasting time. Nobody's
They
letting them waste
well,
time.
they are in secret. Um, and here's one thing I would tell you to do. If a kid ever tells you that I don't have time to do, okay, do me a favor, Johnny. Open up your phone, go to that screen tab app real quick. Let me see what you're at right here, because
Oh,
I
yeah.
guarantee you they're above 5 hours a day.
Yeah,
Every
that's so
single one of
true.
those kids that tells me I don't have time, it's like, hey, let me see your phone real quick. And then
Mhm.
once they see where I'm going, they're like, oh, I think I could probably make time, coach. It's like, yeah,
Yeah,
you can. You just
yeah,
have to budget it.
yeah.
And that's a big part of what we teach too is
Mhm.
time management. Like I had this kid a couple years ago, and him, so I'm not going to say his name. I had a hard time getting eligible for me
Mm,
when I was coaching the boys team, and I went over to his house, and parents are like, parents that are listening to this podcast, I hope that you take this story to heart. Okay, go over to his house. Kid was failing the week of finals. Okay, in December, he's failing 6 out of 7 classes. If he doesn't pass 5 of those by the end of the week, he doesn't get to wrestle second semester. And I go over, mom and dad are like, oh, we'll do anything, coach. I was like, I got a solution for you. And oh, we'll do anything. I'm like, you sure? You gonna back me up on this one? Yes, coach. I'm like, all right, let me see your cell phone. And it's the same thing. Like, show me your screen time. He unlocks it. 17 hours a day of screen time. And
mm,
I was like, dude, how are you sleeping?
mhm,
When are you planning on studying? And he's like, oh, I know. I spend 2. I was like, you are spending more time than you're supposed to be awake on your cell
mhm,
phone. I was like, here's
mhm,
what's gonna happen. I'm going to take this, and you can have it back when you're eligible, whether that's this week or when you start eligible again after Christmas break. And his eyes get as big as dinner plates, and mom and dad are, oh, no, coach can't do that. Can't do it. He has to have it. He has to have it. And it's like, why does he have to have it? No, he
mm,
doesn't. Did you
mm-mm.
have a cell phone, mom, when you were a kid? And she's like, no, I didn't. Dad, did you? No. But what about emergencies? Well, here's what you do in case there's an emergency. That boy over here, Johnny, what you do is you just grab the next human being you see and you say,
Mhm,
hey, call 911. We've got an emergency because that kid has a cell phone in his pocket. Yeah, you do not need a cell phone for emergencies. Like my kids don't
mhm,
have them and they're not going to until they can afford to pay the monthly bill themselves because there's just too much trouble that they can get into and there are
mhm,
too many wasted hours on that thing. So, parents,
mm,
if you're serious about this, you got to draw a line in the sand too. And you got to have some very clear boundaries for your kids. And there are plenty of apps that you can use. App Block is probably my favorite one where you can say, yeah, you can have 2 hours a day to do whatever the heck you want on your cell phone. But after that, it's going to lock it down. And the only thing you can do is make phone calls. That's it.
mm.
Right. And then the parents
I
can
love it.
control that. And there's really no way around it.
Mhm. That's one thing that when I read the stories online of all the parents complaining about all that stuff, I'm like, "Oh, my daughter had maybe a flip phone in her high school time because she graduated in '09, so people
Mhm.
were not doing anything on their phones really. I think she could text, and that was it, and she probably got in trouble with texting at the time because that was the only thing you could do, but I'm glad I didn't have to fight that battle. I
Right.
can't even imagine what that would be like, but I love it. Now that she has a child, they were both saying, because they were both educators, they said he will not have a phone until he's 16. And I
Right.
was like, okay, let's see if that happens. I don't know. But
Yeah,
they've seen the
we felt
bad
pretty
things that
tight.
can happen.
Yeah, there are. And there's a fine line. I don't know what the answer is because the last thing I want is to not let my kids have one until they graduate high school and then be like, all right, here's your phone. Don't get in trouble when you go to college. Like,
Right,
that's a
because then they
terrible
won't
idea.
know.
Yeah, they
Hmm.
need some training wheels, but at the same time, like, I don't think there's any reason that a 12-year-old needs a cell phone right
Right.
now.
Yeah.
Prove me
I'm
wrong.
glad you're doing that. I know. Well, I love when you were talking about how like some of the conflicts are kind of bubbling under the surface and they're not dealing with it. I was thinking about one of the things I teach my clients is that emotions are a tunnel. They have a beginning, they have a middle, and they have an end. And if you stuff them, resist them, fight them, ignore them, they stay stuck in the middle and then they kind of just compound. And that's where that mental health, like when kids have panic attacks or when, different things happen, it's because they've let all of this stuff just sort of just get stuck in there. And so I teach them how to process that feeling so it can move through their body because that energy is supposed to move through us. Our bodies know how to process, but we've learned from society, parents, ourselves, that we need to get rid of it or we need to stuff it down or we need to
Right.
fight it or, all those things. And that's why it's so hard to get rid of.
Yeah. And that's a great analogy. And the one I use with my wrestlers, it's funny you mentioned it. Let me grab something real quick, 2 seconds. When you were talking about the tunnel, I talk about the hose.
Oh,
Because if you put a garden hose on and you turn the water on full blast, goes into the hose, comes out the other end, right? If you put one of these doodads on the end of there and you don't squeeze that handle there and you don't release that pressure, that hose, it can hold it for a while. Okay, but you leave that on there for a couple minutes and then it's going to start to kind of bulge in the middle the way that a snake would after it eats a rat. And then
mm-hmm.
all of a sudden, if you don't relieve that pressure, that thing just bam, it explodes. And that's when we have blowups in the mat room or in the hallway or whatever. And so it's like
Mm-hmm.
you have to just relieve that pressure every once in a while. And you do that by processing those emotions with other people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that one. I'm so glad that you were in the world doing things with really all ages of people, but the teens that are my favorite.
Right.
And I appreciate everything you do. And so,
Thank you.
one of the things that you were saying is that you do some free talks to schools, but you do those in Kansas. So, if anyone's listening that's in the Kansas, maybe Missouri
Yeah, a little bit
area.
of Missouri, and as long as it's within the driving range of what the furthest away school in Kansas would be. So,
Okay.
for example, we went to Elkhart High School, which is in a southwest Kansas. It borders Colorado and Oklahoma, so it's as far away from here as you can get. That was
Mhm.
about 7 hours. So, if you draw basically a 7 hour circle around Topeka, that's pretty much where we go.
Okay, perfect. So any of my school counselor friends or parents who work in schools or areas where that would make sense, they certainly I've heard your talk and it is amazing and so it would be
Thank you.
very helpful to any school that could hear that. And then you also do professional speaking for corporations and businesses and that's across the United States. So if anyone's interested in that and I've heard I haven't heard a business talk, I don't think, but I know I went to a couple of your talks during in services, which were more like leadership,
Right.
strengths based kind of talks, which were very inspirational to me. And so I know you're good at
Thank you.
that kind of speaking too.
Yeah,
And
on that professional side, I generally have three things I talk about. We have a more adult version of what we do for kids on the topic of mental health, and then there is 12 pillars of leadership that are just kind of things that I've used to build our programs at Washburn Rural that translate into a business sector. And
mhm.
then there's one for diversity, equity, inclusion where I talk about harnessing the power of women in the workplace because I think that's something that's vastly overlooked by most corporations. So those are the three areas that we talk about professionally. And then, yeah, the ones that we do for free in middle schools and high schools is pretty much exclusively the mental health thing.
Okay. Well, I'm going to put all of your information in the show notes so that they can email you, look at your
Wonderful.
website, figure out all the things. Maybe they'll start watching the girls wrestling team and how they're doing at Washburn Rural and see
Right on.
if you get to continue with your amazing seasons. And I just am so glad that you were part of this and that you decided to be a guest for us.
Well, I really appreciate you having me on. It was an honor.
Oh, well, thanks. Thank you.
All right. You